So, let's talk about inner source. Who has not heard of inner source? Thanks for being honest. So then, in this case, just a very brief description that just captures it. So inner source is like open source, except everything stays within the company, right? So you inner source it, meaning you have the same practices like in open source, but you work and collaborate together with colleagues within your company, but you don't publish it externally to the outside world. That's inner source, right? Good. So, just wanted to briefly introduce here my colleague Sim Kolamkani. She's from Mercedes-Benz Research and Development India, and unfortunately she couldn't be here today, but she designed the talk with me together. So thank you, Sim. And so inner source definition was very easy. You can talk more about that, but that's basically it. And so to make inner source happening, to get it going in your company is actually very easy because we have it all figured out. And, you know, so at Mercedes-Benz, we do things really well. And so therefore, we did all of these things to make inner source happen. And it's so we have a common inner source platform. That's very important. Like years and years ago, we had many platforms on which we developed our source code. Now we just have, well, two. So one is GitHub and one is GitLab. And GitLab is mostly used by our colleagues in the R&D department, so car IT. And in the remainder of this talk, I will focus on the GitHub version, which is more common in the regular business IT at Mercedes-Benz. And so we have a common inner source platform. That's very important, you know, for you to be able to exchange code and work on and collaborate together. And then we have an inner source process that gives you guidance, what you need to do when you want to engage in inner source activities, and what you need to watch out for and so forth. So it guides you through. That's very nice. And when you're new, we ask you to do an inner source training. So we have that done. That's working very well. We have an inner source license. That's also important. Actually, you know, years and years ago, when we started, we weren't sure, do we need an inner source license? Is that important or not? We said, yes, it is important for reasons I won't dive into right now, but we have an inner source license. Then we have the Mercedes-Benz FOSS Manifesto. So if you don't know it, this is our public commitment to open source and inner source. If you haven't seen it before, go to our open source landing page at opensourcemercedes-benz.com, and then in the top right corner, you will find the FOSS Manifesto. And it mentions inner source in at least two places. It says, please be active in the inner source communities. So that's there. So it's, you know, not just you're allowed to do inner source and open source, but we actively send our engineers on that mission to engage in inner and open source. And if you still have any questions, we have consulting hours at our OSPO. So yeah, we have it all figured out. It's pretty nice, huh? And here is one of our latest inner source success stories. So we have an internal time tracking system where you put your working hours, you know, when you start and when you stop, breaks you take and so forth. And that's used by everyone, not at the big Mercedes-Benz group, but at a Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation, which is where I'm from, right? It's an internal supplier, so to speak. We're the IT techie guys for the big mothership. And so everybody at Mercedes-Benz Tech Innovation uses it. And we recently inner sourced it, because we also established a new system. So we said, hey, why not make it inner source? And it actually does get quite a few contributions from colleagues all around in a company. And so we get code and non-code contributions. And so I just asked our repository owners how many contributions you actually get. And so it was 48 reported issues and feature requests from 34 different users. You know, it's not just that one guy who keeps complaining. So it's 34, that's nice. And we have almost 50 pull requests as well with code contributions from also many different colleagues. So again, not just that one guy who is working. So this is actually really, really a nice example of a good working inner source project. And so why is it working is look at this here. Here are some typical characteristics that a promising inner source project would have. So it needs to solve a common and widespread pain or demand. So used by a lot of people, not just by a few. And with company specifics, because if it didn't have company specifics, then you could just open source it, right? And it needs a or at least one, better at least two dedicated maintainers. That's the case here as well. And you need community management. So they wrote articles in the internet and they said, hey, if you find a bug, please help us, and so forth, right? So it has all these characteristics. The time tracking system, it's completely useless outside of the company, so it's not an open source project, it's inner source. And so that's why I think this is working quite nice. And everybody in a company needs it, so that's 2,500 people. And so it gets a lot of interaction. So as I said, inner source is easy. We have it all figured out. Yeah, but but still, it is actually all together. There are some nice examples. We have more nice working examples, but overall, it is, I have to admit, sadly, still staying behind its expectations. Now, why is that? If you look at certain factors, I mean, for one, open source is usually created for sharing from the start, whereas inner source projects are usually tailored to very specific needs of smaller groups of people, right? And then also, if you look at open source, only about 2% of open source projects are considered successful. And I put with a skewed distribution, meaning the 0.5 out of those two take the largest chunk, and then it really degrades from there. So there's no reason why this should be any different in inner source, right? You cannot realistically expect that, oh, this is inner source, everybody from all over the company will all of a sudden contribute. It's not going to happen, right? 2%. So 2% is just an estimate. Probably about right, yeah, but remember that 73.5% of all statistics are purely made up, sometimes even just on the fly. Okay. Now, what are stumbling blocks that keep inner source from happening, from really taking off? So time and availability of your engineers. Of course, everybody's too busy. Everybody's got, no, I don't have time to work on this person's project over there because I'm really focused and I have, my day only has 25 hours anyway. Yeah, then you have to meet deadlines. So sorry, I can't spend time on your project. Although it's a nice project, but sorry. You don't want to solve somebody else's problem because they're not helping you, maybe. Also, need to fulfill the numbers. That can be a perception in the middle management that I have to report my numbers. If my engineers work on other projects from that guy over there, we really like each other, but my numbers are going to be bad, his numbers are going to be good, and that is a bit of a problem. So I understand your source is good, but I can't really have my engineers devote the time over there. No tangible incentives. We'll talk about that in a bit. And community management. It's again like, you put it there, it's inner source now, you can contribute. It's going to happen by itself, right? Obviously not. So these are stumbling blocks. And on top of that, there's also some pain and friction. And let me show you a very short video what I mean with that.
A lot of times when we ask our developers why they don't participate more in inner source, they say, I really like inner source, but sometimes it's just too painful. What? Too painful? Tell us all about it. And so
we asked our developers about the struggles that they are facing in our current inner source process. It wasn't just about tools or rules, but something deeper wasn't clicking. Some were aware, some were struggling, but some were living inner source.
on November 13th at the Inner Source Summit, we'll show you what we found on our inner source journey and how we're going about to remove the hassle so that the inner source is with us.
Yeah, okay, sorry about the wrong date, by the way. So what we did is we wanted to understand what exactly are the pains of the developers. Why don't they participate more? And so what we did is we created a survey, basically, to map out the full inner source journey. So what exactly is it that you as a developer have to do when you participate in inner source activities? From the very beginning until your first contribution. What do you have to go through here? And so we asked, we didn't ask really experienced inner sourcers because they would know what to do, so for them it would be easier. Also maybe not complete beginners, sort of in the middle. I know what inner source is, haven't really done much, but I kind of know a little bit, but yeah, help me out here. So we asked them to go through all the process steps, and we asked them, where do you find the information? Do you find it hard or easy? How much time do you spend on certain process steps? And what were the problems that you encountered? Okay, and then we documented this and evaluated it and came up with an action plan. So here, this here, I like this. This really sums it up, basically. I'm going to give you a second here. Yeah, thanks for our comms department. I like to put a pirate reference, but not supposed to. But thanks for the comms here. They said, okay, Jack Sparrow, come on. He's a friendly pirate, right? And so thanks, Sim, for the picture. So that's the thing is, the process has problems, but you really want to deal with it. So yeah, we really wanted to. And so what we did, we identified these internal frictions. So first of all, the information, how to work on inner source and where the process is and everything, we have an internal FOSS wiki, but it grew organically. So that means the information is there, but it is scattered in certain places and kind of like not just in that system, but then other stuff is on GitHub and the other thing is over there. So that's obviously a bit of a problem. The inner source process, again, didn't grow organically, but we devised it at first so that it's also safe to do inner source and so forth. And that we found, the feedback was, it can be a bit overwhelming. It's a bit, why is it so big? Then promotion or outreach effort, that's a little bit like number 7. They go together. He's like, when you participate in inner source, nobody says thank you. It's like, it goes unnoticed. Not always, but for a large part. And that can be a bit demotivating, right? Leadership motivation diminishes down the hierarchy. Yes, that's actually true because the engineers, they understand the value of inner source. The very high management also. And the middle management understands it, but the problem that I mentioned earlier is like, yeah, but not sure about the numbers and not exactly sure how we should really go about this. And okay, so that's a bit of a problem here. Then 5, the compliance process feels burdensome. It's like, why do I need to do this? Because of compliance. Okay, good. No, tell them really why is it important. And then 6, feedback. Yeah, so you find flaws in the process. Where do I go to? I send a mail to foss@mercedes-benz.com. And then it can take a long time until you get feedback. It can go unnoticed as well. It should be easy. Here, feedback. There's something wrong here. Okay, and then cultural and behavioral barriers as well. It's still, we've been doing this for a long time, but still, not everybody's convinced because like, oh, inner source, it's not really working that well, is it? Well, let's work together, but that's hard, yeah? So culture is always the most important, or the most difficult, I think. So these things, and then we kind of put them in categories. So, you have emotional friction, negative feelings. It's just like, I don't know, inner source, yeah, but it doesn't feel right somehow. The belonging, that I mentioned, that's the thing. The second, cognitive friction. It's actually difficult to understand some process steps when you don't find where they are and where to go from here and then to there and so forth. So it's, once you have engaged yourself a lot with it, then it's okay. But at the beginning, it is a bit difficult. And then the interactive friction, as I said, the feedback loop. the barriers between legal entities, for example, and other things. Yeah. Okay. So then we went and thought about all these things and tried to get actionable initiatives. You know, the whole, this will take a bit longer, this is the low-hanging fruits, and what can we do here? And then prioritize them based on impact, urgency, and feasibility, and then have ownership for the goals and make sure, hey, what is happening here? Can we have someone who's taking care of this? And then the feedback loop, that's a very important part again as well. So here in these categories, these are the things that we wanted to do, or these are the things that we're doing, have done, and will do. So emotional, we're in the process of implementing a contributor reward program for open source as well as for inner source. And this is surprisingly difficult to do in a company, right? Like, especially in a big company when you have workers' council who say, yeah, but you know, you're judging people's behavior based on what they do with contributions and so forth. So we're in the process of discussing this. The Workers' Council is very open to this, right? Don't misunderstand me. They're not blocking this at all, but we just need to map out some guidelines and rules. But we're on a very good path. So this one, I think, will be really nice. FOSS culture advocacy. So more also in connection with management, talk about inner source and the importance and how this will make the company better for the common goal. Celebrate success stories. You know, if somebody contributes to open source, give them a shout out, maybe in a newsletter or in another format, in a talk or in company gatherings and things like this. Newsletter. Okay, just mentioned that. Then for the cognitive one. Make more inner source awareness sessions, then a centralized knowledge repository, not scattered among more sources. And then the feedback loop, already mentioned that. Then we have a FOSS coordinators, FOSS advocates network that we actively use. This is something that's already been established, but we're gonna use that more for inner source purposes as well. Do FOSS events where we celebrate success stories, and again, the leadership alignment and awareness is something that we'll work on. Okay, and then here on the right, prioritize, I already mentioned this, ownership, timelines, and so forth, and then keep on going. Okay, and so with these points that I mentioned, for example, the scattered resources, we have the inner source discovery platform that we have had before, but we just moved now to a new instance on GitHub Enterprise Cloud, and we re-implemented it there. And now it's not just you can discover the projects that are inner sourced, but you can also have this as a central knowledge hub where you have questions, here's a tutorial, or here's the link to the process and so forth. So in one place, and that I think is a good thing. Yeah. Also the trainings, you can access the trainings from there and so forth. And so makes it easier to find the information that you need. Oops, sorry. Then the process, number 2, we're taking a simplified and holistic view of the inner source workflow, and we'll take away things from the complicated process, make it simpler. That's very important, I think. So, the old process, that was basically, it was a starting point, but now is the time to rework a few things. Number 3, that's something also we need to talk to the Workers' Council still, or is ongoing, but we want to give people shout-outs and just reward them and say thank you. Number 7 is the reward program, as I already mentioned that. And then number 4, leadership motivation. Okay, that's also an ongoing process that they kind of demand inner source, but at the same time, they need to also, maybe motivate their people in their departments to participate a bit more. Feedback mechanism number 6 is, I skipped number 5, right? Oh yeah, the compliance process, for example, I mentioned the inner source license, and when you inner source your repository, then you need to put the license there. And if you don't, there's a bot that will come and say, hey, you probably forgot to include the license, here it is, but as a pull request, so you just actually need to click, and then you have the license in your repository. So, reduce the friction there, make it easy for people, okay? That's one example here, the compliance process. Simplification. Then also, 6, feedback. Exactly, I mentioned the inner source discovery portal. Here, feedback. Now there's a button. You can just click on it, and then it will reach the right people with the feedback. And number 7, already mentioned, cultural and behavior. That's still the toughest one. Yeah, we need to do more talking, I guess, more motivation. And so here's a summary. Inner source is working in parts, but we're not yet satisfied. So we created metrics as well, where we can measure it, the success rate and the adoption rate and so forth. So now that, after we've implemented all these measures, then we can, maybe in a few months, we can use the metrics and say, there's a higher adoption rate now. Now it's working better. Okay. Obviously, that's something that's very useful. If you don't have data, you're just a person with an opinion, right? With the data, it's like, here, look. Can prove it. We analyzed the process framework. We asked the colleagues what their pains are and analyzed their feedback, and now we're in the process of continuing to implement the measures that we found. And so for you to take away, if you're in the same position, inner source is there, but it's not working right, maybe think about this. What is the pain and the friction of your developers? Go and ask them. They will tell you. And then think about how you can make it better, okay? And we have a few minutes left if you have any questions. But so far, thanks very much for your attention.
Do you have any, can you give us an insight on the metrics you're using for inner source, or that's still a secret sauce?
No. So several metrics. One is how many repos do we have all together internally, and then how many of them are inner sourced, right? How many are private versus inner visibility, so public internally. That's one. Another one is the adoption rate of the inner source license. You kind of have to have it in there. The bot helps, so that number should go down. But again, we want to see if that is working. What is another, I find probably the most important metric, and it's also the most difficult one, is how many contributions does a repository get from somebody outside of the core project team? Because that's when inner source and collaboration across teams is actually working. As I said, it's actually very difficult to see, because who's outside of the project team? Who's in the project, but you want to automate it. That's the main problem, right? You kind of know, okay, these are the contributors to the project. Everybody else who's not in that list is an outsider. Yeah, but what if somebody from the team becomes an outsider? Then all of a sudden, 25% of all pull requests come from somebody from outside the project team because it's still connected to that person's name. So, yeah, okay. That's when it's not working. So this is really difficult. We haven't solved it yet. We have some implementations that are working, sort of, but not they're not very accurate. Okay, but so this is another thing. And then a few more that don't come to my mind right now. Thanks.
Do you have any targets for those metrics? Or
No targets. Not yet, anyway.
Why not paying for inner source contribution?
Paying? Pay who?
Like bonus for developers to contribute to inner source, right? Inner source contributions, they should have a compound effect within the company, right? If you create a source code that helps everyone to do work, suddenly you have one engineering doing work for a company of 10,000 engineers? And why don't you simply put a bonus on that and pay the developer.
Okay, so that's very difficult because look, why should somebody get a bonus for helping another project out versus the person who's doing a very great job on the project, you know, from the inside of the project team? Do you know what I mean? Why should somebody get more or a reward extra? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but at the same time, it's funny how open source software or FOSS software culture is relevant when we are talking about giving things away for free, and everyone wants to copy that. But when it's about maintaining and making something sustainable or engaging, you're copying the same mistakes, right?
Well, but so you see, I mean, we're talking about internal employees. You know, it's a different story if somebody contributes to an open source project, right? But internal employees, you know, why should one person get a bonus for contributing to an inner source project versus another person who, you know, puts in the same amount of work and is a great developer, but only contributes to his own project, right? That is very difficult. Also, you know, there are, in fact, because of that, there are restrictions, you know, like we're not allowed to judge your behavior as a developer according to the number of contributions to make, because that says nothing about how well you do your job, right? So yeah, very difficult. What we do want to do is the contributor reward program, you know, for open and inner source, but it would be, you know, non-monetary incentives. Like, for example, you do a lot of contributions to open source, you're probably very interested in open source, here's a free ticket to FOSS Backstage, for example, you know, but not here's another X amount of euros on your salary, because that would be not very justifiable. Yeah? Okay. Thanks. And time-wise, how are we doing?
You know, we're on time.
We're on time.
So
Good.
thank you, Wolfgang.
Thanks again very much. See you around.